You are listening to the CPA MOMS podcast with Dawn Goldberg, CPA. This is episode number 219, How to Handle Bad Leadership. Welcome to the CPA MOMS podcast, the podcast where busy female accountants who also happen to be moms like you get practical support and solutions you need to have it all, a successful career and a happy family. If you are looking for the solution to overwhelm and mom guilt, if you'd like to feel better and have more balance, as well as learn how to take back control of your life, you've come to the right place. Hey there, welcome back to this week's show. As always, I hope you had a great week. I hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I might have said that last week. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But anyway, I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. So is everybody ready for the holidays? I swear each year, I just said to my kids, I don't know what it is, but I think I've lost the Christmas spirit. I'm trying to find my Christmas spirit. And the funny thing is that I was talking to my daughter about it. I said, I think it's as the kids get older, now they're out of the house, you lose that Christmas magic, right? When the kids are younger, everything is just so magical when it comes to Christmas. And when you're younger, it's all about the surprise and the thrill and delight and Santa and bringing all the presents and all the things. And as you get older and everybody's flown the nest, it's kind of like, where's your list? Here's my list. And there's less of that moment of surprise. So I decided that I would go to Home Goods early this morning. I was there as soon as the doors opened and I had the entire store to myself at 8 a.m. It really did give me a little bit more of like Christmas spirit because I'm not really a shopper. I don't enjoy shopping, but when I have the entire store to myself, I think there might have been like 2 other people, but when I had the whole entire store to myself and I got to wander around and look at things and then think of my children and my husband and my other family members and what they would like. And I just had the time. There wasn't the busyness and the craziness that happens when you go shopping at this time of year. It was actually really nice. So I highly recommend it. Before I get started, this is like totally a shameless plug, but if you are an accountant or you know of an accountant, you might want to buy them my book for Christmas. My book is The Smarter Accountant. It's available on Amazon. And I have to tell you that I've been getting some really great feedback. I've gotten some great reviews on Amazon, but you know how people are, it's difficult to get them to write a review, but I've been getting a lot of verbal reviews and meeting people and them telling me how much they've loved the book. So again, shameless plug, but if you go on Amazon and you do a search for The Smarter Accountant book, you will find it. Highly recommend it, if I do say so myself. All right, so let's get started with this week's episode. This is episode number 219. And the title is How to Handle Bad Leadership. If you've ever seen the movie Horrible Bosses, you probably cringe and chuckle at the same time, thinking about how the 3 employees in the movie, they had jokingly suggested that their lives would be happier if their bosses were no longer around. Now, they were initially hesitant, but they eventually agree to kill their employers. And while it's dark, I get it, but it's funny to watch a movie based on dealing with truly horrible bosses. It's really not so funny if you have to deal with any horrible bosses in your real life. And whether it's a manager or a supervisor, a director, an owner, or maybe a partner, it's unfortunate that many of us will have to deal with bad leadership at some point in our accounting career. Now, unfortunately, bad leaders are far too common in organizations of all sizes, and there's some evidence to explain why that is. Researchers at Ohio State University recently experimented with leaderless groups. They were assigned to work together on a set task. So as the researchers watched the groups interact, they noticed a disturbing trend. Most of the groups tended to elect self-centered, overconfident members to their leadership roles. Lacking evidence of competence, the groups tended to mistake blind confidence for leadership ability, which makes it much easier for narcissists who are more likely to display that confidence to be put in leadership roles. Now, this research shows that bad leaders are often promoted for their confidence, but lack actual leadership competence. So, what does that mean for you? It means there's an increased likelihood of having to work for a bad leader at some point in your career. If you haven't had to deal with bad leadership yet, I want you to consider yourself fortunate, but I want to recommend that you continue listening to the podcast because you never know when you might be dealing with a bad leader. And also, you're going to want to listen to ensure that you don't become a bad leader as you advance in your accounting career. Now, while it might seem like you're either stuck dealing with bad leadership or that you'll have to find another place to work, that's actually not true. There are steps you can take to handle bad leadership that will give you back a sense of control. And while bad leadership can often create decreased productivity, it can create staff turnover and unhappy employees, there are steps you can take to handle bad leadership. Whether you're in public or private accounting, there are things that you can do to make it easier on you. And so this week I'm going to discuss 3 types of bad leadership and specifically how to handle the most challenging type of bad leader. So now let's start with 3 types of bad leadership. Now, I've been in public accounting now for over 30 years, and I've worked for some of the big firms like Deloitte and Ernst & Young, and I've worked for small firms as well. And I've had my fair share of good and bad leaders during my career. And I've shared this story on the podcast before, but for those of you that don't know the story, I once worked for a tax partner at Deloitte who was dismissive and he was rude. And before him, I had worked for an amazing tax partner who saw my value, and he offered me the first part-time position in the office after my first child was born. So I was incredibly grateful, and I worked incredibly hard to make sure that I got more done in less time than anyone else in my department. And once this really amazing tax partner retired, this new partner took over the department, and that's when things went downhill for me. Now, I put up with this new tax partner's dismissive and rude behavior for quite a while, especially since I was the first working mom in the office that was allowed to work part-time. But it finally got to be too much for me. And when I sat down and I asked him why he was treating me so poorly, he told me point blank that in his mind, I was taking a job away from a man. He specifically said, "You are taking a job away from a man." I was shocked, but now I haven't worked for anyone who was quite as bad of a leader as he was, but there have been some interesting characters that I've had to deal with. And I'm sure if you and I sat down and had a cup of coffee together, you've probably got some stories to share as well. And as I was doing my usual research for the podcast, I was listening to a podcast that shared 3 types of bad leaders. And it was really interesting. And I knew that I wanted to share it with you all so that you have a better understanding of how to identify and handle bad leadership. So type number 1 is they aren't qualified or have the skills to help you grow. Now, these types of leaders are typically not far enough ahead of you for them to teach you anything. Or, let's be honest, they're frankly incompetent. Sometimes they're placed in a leadership position to fill a void. Not enough thought went into the promotion, or they were able to pull the wool over upper management eyes, right? I'm sure you have a few people in mind when you think about that. It can be frustrating to deal with this type of leadership because you're both learning and growing at the same pace, or possibly with you being ahead of them in some way. Now, on the one hand, these types of leaders can seem indecisive and unsure. And on the other hand, they can overcompensate by being micromanagers or trying to show you who's in charge of who. Okay? So that's type number 1. They aren't qualified or have the skills to help you grow. The next type number 2, is they're just not your type. So like in the dating world, certain people are your type and certain people aren't. The same goes for leadership. Some leaders just don't have the same values or motivations, or they just don't have a style that works for you. Since I am a classic introvert, which means I get my energy from not being around so many people, the type of leader that needs a lot of attention, who wants to constantly pull my focus from what I'm working on, or who likes to micromanage, that type of leader is very challenging for me. I like the type of leader that gives me direction, but also gives me space. One that can give me positive feedback and not just focus on the one thing out of 1,000 that I got wrong, or one that recognizes my contribution. Now, these types of leaders, the ones that aren't your type, these types of leaders aren't inherently bad. They're just not necessarily your cup of tea or good for your career goals. Someone else might be fine working with them, but they're just not your type. Okay, so that's type number 2. They're just not your type. Now, the third and final type is they're a jerk. Plain and simple, they're just a jerk. Now, this leader may not like you. They may not fairly assign projects. They might only give negative feedback without offering constructive feedback. They might talk negatively about you to others or act unprofessionally. In other words, they're just a jerk. Right? Unfortunately, the more senior level this person is, the worse it can be for everyone, and the more toxic the work environment they can create. Now, just like the partner that I just shared before that I dealt with at Deloitte, who said he wasn't treating me fairly because I had taken a job away from a man, the higher their position in the firm or in the company, the more challenging it can be to handle this type of bad leadership. So, what can you do when you're dealing with a jerk? So here's what I learned listening to that podcast that I just mentioned that I think was really helpful. So, how to handle the jerk. First, let me be clear. If you are in an unsafe environment, seriously, you do not need to tolerate bad behavior. Report them or quit. You do not need to try to quote unquote play the game because it's not worth it. However, if the person is just a jerk, I want to help you learn how to handle them better instead of feeling like you need to change jobs each time that you deal with a jerk. See, the truth is that there will probably be other bad leaders on your accounting career path. So here's the thing. Why not learn better ways to handle them now so that you don't feel like you always have to change your circumstances to feel better, like changing a job? So if you think about it, mergers and promotions happen all the time in accounting. So who your leader or manager is today will likely not be who you work with forever. So it's best to be prepared, because if there's one thing that is constant, especially in accounting, it is change. Sometimes the change is for the good and sometimes the change is for the bad. The truth is that if you are in a rush to get away from a jerk, what that signals to me is that you may need to do a little coaching work. You cannot entirely avoid bad leaders. And honestly, here's what I recommend. I recommend you learn and grow from every single one of those jerks, because they offer you the best opportunity to do some of the work that I'm going to suggest. So I recommend this with any challenging relationship, whether it's professionally or personally. Here's what I say. Use the current challenges that you're experiencing to do some great work that you can carry forward. You will learn so much more about handling bad leadership when you actually have a bad leader to base your work on. That's the upside of having a bad leader. So it's important to understand that when you constantly try to get away from bad leaders, you're giving your power away. You're putting them in charge of your career, and you're living at the effect of their jerk behavior. The reason I wanted to do this episode is because I want you to have some better coping skills so that you can take your power back. And I also don't want you to be afraid to leave the comfort of what you consider quote unquote good leadership because you're afraid of what's out there. You are holding yourself back when you're so afraid of working for a jerk that you stay too comfortable where you are. You have to be honest with yourself if you're not going after opportunities because of fear of the unknown or fear of the jerks out there in the world. The truth is that when you know how to handle working for anyone, nothing can stop you, even the jerks in leadership positions. So, what can you do if your leader is a jerk? First, you have to realize that the worst that can happen when you work for a jerk is how you feel. Whether you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or annoyed, the best news that I can give you is that you can take back 100% of your power because how you feel is entirely within your control. How you feel is only ever caused by what you're thinking, not by what the jerk is doing or not doing. Now, I understand this can be confusing to understand, but it's true. The things people say and how they behave are neutral. They do not cause how you feel. Only your thoughts about what they say and how they behave. That's what can cause your feelings, or what does cause your feelings. So if you're dealing with a jerk, the first step that I suggest is to name how you feel. What is the one-word emotion that describes how you are feeling? So if you answer that question with anything other than a one-word emotion, you're not actually naming the feeling. So let me give you an example, because a lot of my clients get tripped up with this. If you are thinking, I feel like he is so frustrating to work for, that is a thought. That is not a feeling. The feeling, the one-word feeling, would be frustrated in this example, right? I feel like he is so frustrating to work for is not a feeling. The feeling would be frustrated. Now that you've named the feeling, the one-word emotion, the second step is to ask yourself, what's the thought creating that feeling? When you think about what that person says or does, what they do or don't do, what is the thought that creates the feeling of frustration? So, for example, the thought might be, he is so difficult to work for, or she has to stop emailing me when I'm not at work. In this second step, you need to become aware of the thought creating the feeling that you're having about the jerk. And the third and final step is to process that feeling. That simply entails describing where you're feeling the feeling in your body. Does it have a color? Is it hot or cold? Does it move slowly or quickly? You see, when you allow the feeling without resisting it or pushing against it, you're actually processing it. Now, the beauty of learning how to process an emotion is that you can still have a jerk boss, but when you know how to feel any and all emotions that come up, you don't let those feelings take over. So in other words, you have a thought, that thought creates a feeling, you process the feeling by describing it, you don't resist it, and then you let it go. And the best part is that it only takes 90 seconds for the chemical that was released by your brain that's causing the emotion to actually dissipate. Allow yourself 90 seconds to feel what a feeling feels like in your body, and the chemical will have time to go through your bloodstream. You see, the truth is that the jerk will not stop being a jerk just because you have a negative emotion about them. So you might as well learn a much better way to deal. Here's the beauty. The faster you learn how to process an emotion, the more power you have to handle bad leadership. So here's the key. Be willing to feel all the feels by noticing them, naming them, describing how they feel in your body, and then letting them and the jerk go in your mind. That is how you handle working with anyone and not letting them derail your career. So don't let other people's personalities, their style of leadership, or their lack of self-awareness get in the way of you having what you want. The truth is that you'll most likely deal with various bad leadership over the course of your career, but hopefully you now know how to take your power back if you're dealing with a jerk. So in summary, while bad leadership can often create decreased productivity, staff turnover, and unhappy employees, there are steps you can take to handle bad leadership. The truth is that there will probably be other bad leaders on your accounting career path, so why not learn better ways to handle them now so you don't have to feel like you always have to change your circumstances to feel better. And finally, the faster you learn how to process an emotion, the more power you have to handle bad leadership. All right, there you have it. That was episode number 219, How to Handle Bad Leadership. Now, again, I want to reiterate, if you're being mistreated, leave. There's plenty of jobs out there, believe me. The accounting profession is desperate for people. You do not need to settle, my friends. You do not need to settle for bad behavior if it's something that you literally cannot tolerate and it crosses a boundary. However, I also want to suggest that you don't go job hopping, because people and their personalities and their egos and all the things, if we continue to keep running away from people, then we're just going to be constantly running. You still have to deal with bad leadership no matter where you go, no matter what your position is or what you do. So I always say, if you can stay and use the situation as a way to start to implement what I'm teaching you, I think it's amazing, because you will bring that with you. If you decide to stay, that's great. If you decide to leave, fine, but you're bringing that skill with you. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully you understand how to better handle bad leadership, especially when it comes to the jerks. I would really hate for every working mom out there to feel like she needs to get a new job every time she's dealing with a jerk. Again, if they're mistreating you and it's just intolerable, then leave. But if you can stay and just work on the skill of, like I shared with you, processing an emotion, because the worst that can happen when you're dealing with a jerk is a negative emotion. And if you can deal with that, if you know how to process that, then there's nothing that you can't handle. And it just really puts you in the power position. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like what you heard, be sure to click subscribe on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. At CPA Moms, we pride ourselves on being the e-harmony of the accounting world, making it possible for business owners to have their accounting needs met by amazing CPAs that are moms just like you. Whether you are an accountant interested in growing your own solo mompreneur business, or perhaps you are looking for flexibility to work from home, or maybe you are looking to grow your current firm or team, CPA Moms has what you are looking for. Check us out at cpa-moms.com.